Greetings, I'm Dr. Heath Robinson, and welcome to your first lesson in What is Geography? The first thing I like to point out is that the word geography itself comes to us from ancient Greek. It's composed of two different Greek words, the first being geo, which means earth, and the other graphy, which means to write or to describe. So geography literally means earth writing, or to write about or to describe the earth. And geography does come out of this tradition of ancient Greek scholarship. The Greek scholar Eratosthenes in the 3rd century BC was the first person to coin the term geography, and its meaning, this to write about or to describe the earth, does certainly describe one of the major traditions inside the discipline of geography, which is descriptive. What is in a particular location? What is it like? Sometimes many people's first experience with geography is in things like travel writing, where people do write about descriptions of different places, foreign and exotic places, and describe what they're like, and really telling people what is so unique about different places on the earth. But there's also another side to geography, which is about making predictions. And when you want to make predictions about something, when you want to make scientific predictions about something, you're really studying general things. Oh, I've noticed that this mountain range is this way, and so is this mountain range. I wonder when I get to this third mountain range if it will also be similar. That's sort of making predictions about what different places will be like based on other knowledge. So we have these two different themes running through geography as a discipline. Sometimes we focus on descriptions of very unique places and what's going on in places. Other times we're taking a very scientific approach to things about being able to predict what's happening and different phenomenon in different locations about the planet. But if I ask you to come up with one question that geography is about, what would you say? If you were trying to encapsulate all of geographic study in one question, what would you say? It's a one-word question. Can you think of what I'm trying to get you to think of? I hope so. That question is where. Where is something? Where is Istanbul? Where is the Sahara Desert? Where are the Himalayan mountains? Those kinds of questions. And if you are someone who has had a rather limited experience in geography in, say, a social studies class in high school, maybe some world regional geography in high school, something like that, you may very, very strongly associate geography with learning where. Maybe map quizzes. Everyone in geography does map quizzes, of course, right? You may be handed a map of Africa and you need to label all of the countries in Africa, or you have to memorize the capitals of all of the US states or something like that, right? Okay, so that's where something is in a very specific sense, and of course in that situation, of course, they're focusing on sort of a rote memorization of that kind of material. In this sense, it is somewhat analogous to history and history's specific question. If I ask you what central question is history concerned with, then you would probably say when, right? Okay, so if history is when and geography is where, you can often see that geography and history will frequently go very well together, because you're talking about when did something happen and where did something happen. In order to really understand something, you often need both. And so oftentimes people will say that history and geography will go together very, very closely. But what is very, very important to understand is that where is not the end of geographic inquiry. In fact, it's the very beginning of it. And in this video series, we're going to start with where, and then I'm going to take you through a series of questions, a series of analytical questions that you can ask about different phenomenon that begin with this where question. However, before I do that, before I really get into questions beyond where something is, I want to pause on this where question and really talk about it in more detail. Because even though it's the first question of geography, where is something, sometimes it's not so easy to answer. And sometimes people will spend a tremendous amount of effort to determine where something is. So I want to focus on this where question first. All right, let's begin then with geography's most basic question of where. Sometimes when you ask a where question, where is Istanbul? Where is China? Where is Moscow? Where is Canada? Where are the Ural Mountains? When you ask those kinds of questions, sometimes they're very easy to answer, particularly in today's world, because those kinds of very basic geographic facts are the kinds of things that we catalog. They're collected on maps. Maps are collected into atlases. And so oftentimes, if you just need to know where something is, whether it's a cultural feature on the planet or it's a physical feature of the planet, very often, and especially if you have connectivity to the internet and you can bring up some type of internet mapping service, you may be very easily able to find out where Lake Victoria is, if you need to know, or something like that. But that's not always the case. And it is even the case that even when you think something is easy to answer, it may actually be very complex to answer. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I want to know where I am. Where am I? In today's world, that seems like a very easy question for me to answer. All of us today are carrying around tracking devices, right? We carry around cell phones with GPS receivers in them that are constantly broadcasting our location, either by GPS or by the cell towers that we're close to or so forth. And so it's become really an expectation for almost everyone today to be able to pick up a cell phone, technology such as this, and be able to ask it immediately, where am I? We expect to be able to pull up some mapping application, whether it's Google Maps, whether it's Apple Maps, or some other mapping service, and we expect to be able to instantly ask our technology exactly where we are and for it to be able to drop that pin on our device exactly where we're located. But it's not really as easy as you think, right? Okay, so this cell phone is able to tell me my location anywhere on the planet, let's say, on demand, but it's not the case that that's an easy thing to do. This cell phone is part of the global positioning system that has a global positioning system receiver in it. And so what's actually happening is that there are many satellites orbiting the Earth that are part of the Navstar GPS constellation, that's the US system, that are constantly sending out all of these signals, broadcasting where they are in orbit around the planet, and then actually my cell phone is receiving these signals from all of these satellites, and they're actually receiving them at the speed of light, and then performing mathematical calculations, and then based on the positions of the satellites, determining my position on the planet. So that's not actually, in one sense, an easy thing to do. In fact, with the US Navstar GPS system, a tremendous amount of effort, a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of maintenance is required and is spent in order to initially develop that system. Hey, we need to be able to determine our position on the planet with great accuracy no matter where we are. Well, then there was a tremendous amount of effort that had to go into thinking up a way that that could be done, designing all of these satellites, getting them into the correct orbit and so forth, and then upgrading all of the systems, maintaining all of the systems. It's actually not so easy for us to be able to determine exactly where we are, even though the ordinary consumer just expects that to be a very easy thing for them to be able to determine, to turn on their cell phone and say, where am I, and get the map to pop up. So many people are interested in this most basic of the geographic questions, and they expect to be able to have the answer on demand regardless of where they are, but it requires a lot of technology and maintenance and know-how behind the scenes in order to make that happen. So that's one example of where people are concerned with this most basic geographic question, and it may appear easy to an end consumer to answer, but it's actually extremely complex to get the answer to that. Let me give you another example. Let's say you work for a forestry service, and you're interested in maintaining the health of all of your trees in the forest, right? Okay, so now you know that some of the trees in the forest have this particular kind of fungus on them that's hazardous to the tree. And you really want to know, where are the trees that have been infected with this particular fungus, so that you can go spray them down, whatever needs to happen in order to eliminate the fungus in the forest. Okay, so how could you do that? Well, one way you could do that is to go out and manually inspect all of the trees. Maybe you don't have the manpower for that. You're going to have to go out. It's going to be very time consuming. It's going to take a lot of people to go out there into the forest inspect each individual tree manually, report back, and so forth. Don't have time for that. Don't have the time, don't have the money for that. Well, what if those particular fungus-infected trees reflect electromagnetic radiation according to a particular wavelength? They have a particular reflective signature in the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay? So what could you do? Well, you could decide, hey, what I want to do is I want to design a satellite with a particular kind of sensor that's very sensitive to electromagnetic radiation within the particular wavelength that this fungus-infected tree will reflect, right? So then you design all of this, you put this satellite with the sensor system into orbit around the planet and have it start collecting information. And then when it passes over your forest, you get all of this digital data about your forest, about what kinds of electromagnetic radiation are being reflected off of the trees, right? So the electromagnetic radiation comes from the sun's light hits the earth, the sun's light reflects off of the trees, bounces off the trees and up into the collector on your satellite and beams that information back down to you. Then you gather that information, and then you use computer systems to scour all of that data to say, now where are the trees that are reflecting the particular electromagnetic radiation that are indicative of a fungus-infected tree? Okay, now again, that's not a real simple thing to do. That's a very complex process, a very technological process, designing the sensor, deploying the satellite, and so forth. Sometimes, though, it may be the only option available to you. You deploy all of this technology, you use your computer systems to go through that, and then you're able to determine where the trees are that are infected with the particular fungus that you're interested in. And it may be especially the only option to you if you're really interested in a big area. What if you're interested in finding out where this particular fungus is on the trees all across a particular continent, or even across the entire world? You can't go out and manually inspect that. You're going to have to come up with a technological solution to be able to detect that. And one option to do that might be something like remote sensing from a satellite. Okay, so I mentioned in the beginning that the question of where is the most basic geographic question you can answer. Where is something, regardless of what it is? It's very, very often the case that people are interested in where things are. This where question is the beginning of our inquiry, it's not the end. Regardless of whether it's very easy for you to answer a question regarding where the particular phenomenon is that you're interested in, or if it's very difficult, it's still the beginning of your inquiry. So the next thing that I want to do is to guide you through a series of questions that you can begin to answer and get deeper into geographic analysis once you've been able to answer this basic question of where. So we'll begin that in the next lesson.